Okay, that's all. I'm just setting up some things here. In a minute.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Namaste, assalamu alaikum. Good evening, good night, or good morning to all of you. We are so pleased to have people in this meeting from all parts of the world in different time zones. I am Shakira Mohammed from Trinidad and Tobago, a teacher for the past 16 years. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the 226th edition of our ICC Thought Leaders Forum. We wish to sincerely thank all of you who have contributed in whatever way to the success of this ongoing Pan-Indo-Caribbean and Pan-Indian Diaspora global project. So for 225 unbroken continuous weeks, we have been here every single Sunday. And in the past 4 years, 4 months, and 2 weeks, we have featured 1,039 presenters from all parts of the world, speaking on 225 topics. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a weekly forum being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center, a legally registered research and publishing company operating since 2010. And today, we are supported by Ashokram Saran, President of the Indian Diaspora Council, who is with us in this program. So thank you for joining us. In order to continue this weekly program and to make it bigger and better, we are asking for suggestions and volunteers. If you give a donation, your name will be placed on our poster and all promotional materials, and you can contact Dr. Kumar Mahavir for details. So we wish to extend belated happy birthday greetings to our ICC friends, Dolores Trutaram and Dr. Shadanan Singh. May they live longer in good health and happiness. We will now play a song to celebrate their birthdays from the movie entitled Naya Daur, released in 1957. The singers are Mohammed Rafi and Asha Bhosle. The cast, Dilip Kumar and Vijanti Maya. Dr. Kumar?
जब ऐसे चिकने चेहरे हो जब ऐसे चिकने चेहरे तो कैसे न नजर फिसले तो कैसे न नजर फिसले जिंद मेरी ये
पक गए जिंद मेरी ये।
कभी डाल इधर भी फेरा, तो कभी डाल इधर भी फेरा, के तक तक नैन थक गए, के तक तक नैन थक गए जिंद मेरी ये।
जहाँ मेरा यार बसता, कि जहाँ मेरा यार बसता जिंद मेरी।
पानी लेने के बहाने आजा, वो पानी लेने के बहाने आजा, के तेरा मेरा एक रास्ता, के तेरा मेरा एक रास्ता जिंद मेरी ये। चांद के बहाने देखूं, वो तुझे चांद के बहाने देखूं, तुझे चांद के बहाने देखूं, वो तुझे चांद के बहाने देखूं। तू छत पर आजा गोरिये, तू छत पर आजा गोरिये जिंद मेरी ये।
अभी छेड़ेंगे गली के सब लड़के, ओ अभी छेड़ेंगे गली के सब लड़के, के चांद मेरे छिप जाने दे, के चांद मेरे छिप जाने दे जिंद मेरी ये।
Thank you. That was a very fun song. And happy birthday again to Dolores Juteram of Trinidad and Dr. Shadanand of Suriname, now living in the Netherlands. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce our moderator today, who is Shalama Mohammed, the co-director of this ICC Zoom platform, who is a business teacher and researcher from Trinidad and Tobago. She obtained her master's degree in business psychology from Franklin University in the USA. Shalama, welcome.
Thanks so much, Shakir. Assalamu alaikum, namaste, and welcome to all of you from a very hot and sunny Trinidad and Tobago. Thanks so much for being here with us. I can't let this one pass. Dr. Mahavir is such a humble person. He really did not want this to be revealed, but to everyone, tomorrow is his birthday. So very, very early happy birthday greetings to you. And I hope you enjoy that song as well. Ladies and gentlemen, this program is being recorded on Zoom and live streamed on the YouTube channel of the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center. Welcome to all of you on YouTube at this time. To avoid intrusions from trolls, just a little reminder that our IT manager has muted everyone. Speakers, please do not admit anyone, do not unmute anyone, and do not allow anyone to share your screen. Thanks so much for your cooperation. Our program today is about political coalitions and the potential to contribute to equitable governance. In Trinidad and Tobago, Republic Day is celebrated on September 24th, 2 days from now, to mark the date when the first parliament met under the new Republican Constitution in 1976. The Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago outlines the fundamental rights and freedoms of the citizens and a government system built on democracy. But the current constitution has been called into question. According to media consultant Orrin Gordon, the TNT constitution is defective in one important respect. Too much power of nomination and appointment resides in the premiership and presidency, and therein lies suspicions of cronyism. So we have several related questions with regard to this, which we hope to have addressed today. Could political coalitions foster equitable governance in Trinidad and Tobago as well as in countries in the wider Indian diaspora? Would collaboration among diverse ethnic and political groups create more inclusive policies and reduce tensions between different communities? Could coalitions bridge historical divides, such as between Indo and Afro-descendant populations, fostering shared leadership and equitable resource distribution? Might these alliances help address underrepresentation and ensure that marginalized voices in the Indian diaspora are heard? Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear from our first speaker. And we want to welcome Dr. Subhash Apana, good morning, from Fiji, the head of the School of Business and Management at the University of the South Pacific. He holds a PhD in governance and public sector reforms from Swinburne University in Australia. Welcome, sir. You can go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Shalima. Greetings to all of you from Fiji. Very honored to be given the platform again to present on and share information on Fiji. All right, so I'll go straight to the slides, and I'll try to keep to the time schedule as closely as possible. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yeah, we're hearing you quite clearly.
Thank you.
Just
Thank you,
waiting
Shalima.
for your slides.
Okay, so I've got this. This was the topic that I received. Would political coalitions contribute to equitable governance in the Indian diaspora? In the case of Fiji, I'll just go straight to a little bit of the background before the main presentation begins. We've just in 2002 we had an election in Fiji, and we were. The outcome forced us to form a coalition government. So far we've had more than 18 months of experimenting with a coalition government, so I can throw some light on how this works. But before we go there, one of the things that makes coalition governments work is the presence of trust. We cannot hang on, just let me get to the slides. We cannot downplay the importance of trust across the various divides that exist in any polity, if you like. So okay, I think the slide should be visible now.
Yes,
I'll just enlarge it.
Very good. Yes.
So that's the title, and there's a special slide that I prepared there. And yeah, so the element of trust, and this then brings into the picture a number of issues that need to be considered before a coalition can be formed. Now, in the case, in our experience, the coalition was formed largely because there was a shared concern about the excesses of the previous government. So the common enemy theorem applied in this case. Okay. Now, when you have that as a starting point, then a lot depends on other exigencies. Okay. So having said that, we proceed with the presentation. These are the aims of this presentation, to provide a historical brief on governments in Fiji. Remember, the country is divided is largely demarcated politically, ethnically. Okay, some might disagree with me, but to a large extent, that has been a dominant consideration in voting patterns. So moving to the next slide, this is why I have highlighted here the population percentages. That population, today's population, is an estimate because we don't have any accurate figures, but I've got to that figure by looking at the immigration figures that we have coming from speeches by politicians, and pegging it against established data in terms of population. So you will see as we go along that the percentage of Indo-Fijians, and I'm calling it Indo-Fijians, some people might disagree with me, saying that why are you calling us Indo-Fijians? But for the purposes of discourse, I'm using this term here. Okay, it makes it very clear to demarcate. You will note that the percentage has decreased tremendously. Okay, so from the 50% of 1970 when we gained independence to the 30% that we see here, and this is fast decreasing. Okay, some say that that's a bad thing, but it depends on who you are talking to. All right. Now note that we don't even have 1 million people here. Okay, so these are the governments that we've had. 1970, we had this alliance government, which was the Alliance Party, which was the first ruling political party, had a chief as its leader, and it was propped up by the colonial government. So it had three legs. They called it the alliance stool, the three-legged stool. 3 legs meaning the Indian voters, Indian voting bloc, and the general voters, meaning anybody who is neither Indian nor ethnic Fijian, and the Fijian voters. So the three-legged stool. And this three-legged stool took us through the first elections in 1972. Now, the important thing is in 1972, more than 30% of Indo-Fijians voted for the Alliance Party. So there was trust in the first Prime Minister across the ethnic divide. Okay? And then in 1977, against all expectations, because people misread the undercurrents and the political developments that were happening amongst the ethnic Fijians, we had a surprise election result where the NFP, which was the predominant ethnic Indian party, Indo-Fijian party, won against expectations. And there was internal bickering on who should be the next prime minister. And because it continued over a period of time, there was maneuvering going on behind the scenes from the other side. And of course, they were not going to accept the results. There were murmurings of violence and so on and so forth. And this led to the formation of a minority government again under the same leader of the Alliance Party. Okay, and so there was a snap elections called in 1977 September, where the National Federation Party disintegrated because it disintegrated and contested the elections as 2 factions. All right, and then in 1982 we had another election, and Ratumara came back to power. 1987 we had a surprise result again, and here we had Dr. Timothy Bavandra coming into power at the head of a National Federation Party and Fiji Labour Party coalition. Okay. Now, the National Federation Party has always been heavily ethnic Indian, Indo-Fijian, and the Fiji Labour Party at that time was very heavily worker supported. Okay. It's the unionists who were at the forefront of that party. Now, I mentioned earlier that the surprise result in April 1977 happened because we misread the developments in the Fijian polity. It's because there were murmurings of dissent that were being kept suppressed by the chiefly system. Okay, so there's within the Fijian part of the community, we have a chiefly system in place where you have chiefs and commoners. And largely, historically, prior to 1987, the chiefs predominated in political positions because they simply moved from the traditional positions of prominence to national positions of prominence. Okay, so then, of course, we have a coup in 1987. 1 month after this government came into power, headed by an ethnic Fijian, a union leader. We had a coup in May 1987, and then from 1987 to 1992, we had an interim government headed in the beginning by Rambuka, who was the coup leader, and then Ratumara, the same leader that took us through independence, was back until 1992. And then in 1992, we had another constitution. So the 1970 constitution was scrapped. We had a 1992 constitution, heavily ethnically biased, and it was a manifestation of ethno-nationalism. And there was elections in 1992 and again in 1994 when the Rambuka government fell and then came back into power through elections. And then there was cross-ethnic cooperation between Rambuka and Jairam Reddy, who was the leader of the NFP at that time. And they came up with the 1997 constitution, which was widely acclaimed. Okay. So under that constitution, we had elections in 1999 when Mahendra Chaudhry came in as Prime Minister. Again, this was not widely expected. It was a surprise. And then in 2001, we had another election where Ngarase came into power. This is an ethnic Fijian. The SDL party was the party that replaced the former Alliance Party. And then the SDL party won again in 2006. We have another coup after that. And from 2007 to 2014, we have a military government under Orang Bainimarama, the Prime Minister who just got ousted in 2002. Then in 2013, we have another constitution put in place by, this was an imposed constitution. And in 2014, we had elections. PG first under Bainimarama won these elections. 2018, he won these elections. And in 22, under the same constitution, Stephen Rambuka came into power through a coalition with, and he formed a coalition government. Now, the point here is that the 2013 constitution was an imposed constitution, and there were tensions within it that were going to come to the fore at some stage. Okay, so the question that we ask is, all right, so we get into coalition. What is it that the Indo-Fijian wants? And I spoke to a lot of people, as many as I could, and I also have been reading on it, have been looking at speeches here and there, postings on social media and so on and so forth. And it appears that, of course, this list is not complete. Things can be added to it. One of the key concerns of the Indo-Fijian is security. We have an escalation of crime here. Robberies have gone up. There are little things like that, home invasions and stuff like that, which had been well taken care of by the Bainimarama government. Okay, and that is the reason why a lot of Indo-Fijians were supporting Bainimarama. In fact, they had abandoned their traditional support for parties like the National Federation Party and the Fiji Labour Party. They had moved to support Bainimarama and the Fiji First Party, FFP. Okay, so security is a major concern. Then we have land tenure. Quite a large number of Indo-Fijians are farmers. They still tied to the land, and they want security of tenure. So that's another ongoing concern. It has been addressed on and off over the years. The next point there is recognition. I mean, like when you hear public utterances and you follow what is being said and look at the nuances, and you will see that there is a slight retuning there towards seeing Indo-Fijians as something that is just there but not a priority. So that recognition needs to be centralized, and the Indo-Fijian wants that. They also want an understanding and an appreciation of their presence here and the contributions that they make. After all, we provide the captive investment base in the country. I just came back from the Solomon Islands. I made a couple of trips there this year. And if you look at the level of development there compared to the level of development here, the main difference, and I'm taking a chance by making this observation, the main difference appears to be that they don't have a captive investment base in a community like we do here in Fiji, where it's the Indo-Fijians, they keep on doing what they do, and it has flow-on effects for the economy. This is not captured in public pronouncements as much as we would want it to be. The next point is equal access to opportunities. We talk about merit-based appointments, we talk about business licenses, loans, opportunities, and so on and so forth. There is a problem there. Consent from government, stuff like that. Then we have the issue of access to bigger opportunities. By this, I mean like diplomatic postings and civil service positions, senior positions, and so on and so forth. At this point in time, we see a movement towards replacement of those whose contracts are expiring or have expired with ethnic Fijians. So this also is a source for concern and a source for alarm. And lastly, this issue that I had talked about in my earlier presentations 2 years back when I talked about acceptance. Acceptance is still an issue here. Acceptance of an immigrant community after all these years, more than 140 years. Okay, so I will not talk about this too much, this slide here, but you see the problem here is this last one, zero-sum thinking. Okay, so if this person gets it, that person misses out, and of course that person is of a particular ethnicity. This is a major problem. We forget that the cake has to be grown. The size of the national cake has to be grown. And when that happens, then the sharing out of the spoils of the pieces should not be a problem. Okay, so what do we have here in Fiji? The 2013 constitution established, put in place the Dihon system of voting of government. Okay, so with the Dihon system, we have a single constituency. Okay, so when you have a single constituency, there is heavy reliance on one person to attract votes. So that's why we had Bainimarama attracting the largest number of votes in the last elections. Okay, and the next thing is with that heavy reliance on one star and one constituency, it's very difficult to have local representatives who are closer to the grassroots. So the accountability mechanism becomes blurred. Feedback from the public becomes a little bit of a longer process. It's not as direct. Then, of course, there were other provisions or requirements. Like, for example, if you wanted to register a political party, you needed 30,000 signatures. And then there was a vetting process. Okay, there is a vetting process. And of course, through that vetting process and through manipulating the timing of it, you can easily disqualify political parties, newly registered political parties or aspiring political parties. Then there's the issue of 5% threshold. So any political party that attracts less than 5% of the votes, national votes, do not have a representative in parliament. Okay. And the size of the parliament is 50. It has been increased to 51. And of course, the number of seats is allocated according to percentage of votes attracted by the political party. So that's the electoral system that we have under the 2013 constitution. The political environment up to the 2022 elections, we had 16 years of Bainimarama rule, 8 years of elected government by the same person, and there was visible heavy-handed rule, people being taken into custody for questioning repeatedly, muzzling of the media, the whole works. Okay? And there was a marked antipathy towards the chiefly system, the Fijian chiefly system. And this led to a seething negativity. In fact, it had developed into anger. That because the chiefs, in a way, symbolize traditional Fijianism. Okay. And of course, the next point here is the Kayum phenomenon. We had this Indo-Fijian, very articulate, very hardworking, but at the same time, extremely on your face. And it didn't go well with ethnic Fijians. So there was a silent storm. There was a silent storm rising. Now, when the voting was being counted and figures released, it looked like at one stage that the Fiji First Party was coming back into power. Okay. There were suspicions because a lot of people knew that the bulk of the voters were not pro Fiji First. They were not pro Bainimarama. But for some reason, the results were showing and leaning heavily in favor of the Fiji First Party at that early stage. And suspicions were that there was some cheating going on. And then, of course, there was a glitch. Power went off. Okay, the same thing had happened in 2018. Power went off. And when it came back on, for some reason, it was seen that the whole block of votes had been allocated to some unknown wrong person. And then it was realized that something not right was going on. Okay. And then, of course, they quickly moved it back to Bainimarama, and that's what they call the glitch. And from there, the trajectory of the results changed from that point in time. And so if you put 2 and 2 together, you do get 5. Okay. And so the Fiji First Party, Bainimarama's party, got 24 seats. The People's Alliance Party, which is the government Rambuka's party now, 19. National Federation Party, 5. And Sudelpa, 3. Now note that the Fiji First Party is a multiracial party. Okay. People's Alliance was heavily ethnic Fijian. National Federation Party, heavily Indo-Fijian. And Sudelpa, traditional Fijian. Okay. So then negotiations started. You see, this is 19 plus 5 is 24. These two parties had already declared prior to elections that they would work together. Okay, so this 24-24, it was a tide. And therefore, they started wooing this party here. And ultimately, what happened was the NFP had 3 ministers, 1 deputy prime minister, 1 assistant minister, 1 deputy speaker. Sodelpa had 3 ministers, 1 deputy prime minister. And so in this whole exercise, the coalition negotiations, bargaining, if you like, it was Sodelpa that really managed to get the most concessions. Okay. The source of victory mainly to Sodelpa. Provincial considerations came into play. We have 14 provinces in this country. Ethnic Fijian demarcations are used there. Traditional demarcations are used there. Then you have chiefly considerations, you know, which chief is this, how powerful is he? And then we have Fijian elite families and formal links with people who had been there in 1987 and so on and so forth. All these considerations were there when decisions were made on who is to get what after the negotiations. What were the reasons? There was a desire for change. Everybody wanted change. Okay, and there was a quest for power. The principles of inclusiveness was at play. What were some special considerations from the wider non-ethnic Fijian group? We had these concerns about investment, expertise, sugar industry. The point is that the sugar industry is now more or less dead. And of course, from the Fijian side, we had traditional grassroots support, land stability, and all these considerations came into play. So what influence, what cards does the NFP have? We have our Minister for Finance. Budgets are made there. He has a direct hand in it. He presides over it. But the thing here is that demands are made from everywhere. Requests are made from everywhere. And of course, then there are demands as well. Okay. So people who are involved directly with these budgets tell us that there is a heavy leaning towards considerations that don't really have any special place for Indo-Fijians in these budget talks and when budgets are formed. Number two, we saw when the Gaza war erupted, the National Federation Party took their conscience stand and they said, we will not support it, but they were outvoted. Then more recently, we had parliamentary emoluments where 100% raises were given to parliamentarians and huge perks and allowances. The NFP opposed that, but they were outvoted. So we have within that coalition, the NFP sitting in a pretty weak position. Okay, so these are points that I had made earlier. Like I said, the time factor is at play here.
Yeah, and Dr. Apna, we'd appreciate it if you could make your closing comments now. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so at this point in time, the Fiji First Party is more or less, it has disintegrated. It's no longer there. Okay, we have a loose collection of 9 NFP rogues, Fiji First Party rogues. And because of the presence of these 9, the position or the requirement of the NFP has disappeared. The NFP was needed to form the government before, the 5 NFP members of parliament. Now they can easily be replaced by any 5 of these 9 from the Fiji First, the disintegrated Fiji First Party. There's continuous maneuvering for positions going on behind the scenes. And of course, we have a perennially fractured Fijian polity. This, see, over time, Fijian political parties have popped up and disappeared, popped up and disappeared. The only long-lasting one was the Alliance Party of the 1970s. Okay, and this has implications for what comes up. You don't have a Fijian grouping and an Indian grouping and we're talking coalition, not anymore. We have various groupings, okay? And then we have Mr. Chaudhary, the Fiji Labour Party leader, is still around. So that factor is also there to be considered. What happens in the future? There will always be fractious politics in Fiji. I think we are going towards the path of Solomon Islands and Vanuatu. Vanuatu has had 5 governments in the past 2 years. You know, as soon as the interests shift, we have a need for another government and so on and so forth. So with that, these are the topics that I covered in my presentation. I will be able to talk more when there is question and answer time. All right. So thank you very much for listening to me.
You're welcome. A very enlightening presentation. And let me ask you, I know it's early in the morning. Are you able to stay with us for the full 2 hours, or do you need to leave soon?
I will. It all depends on how you want to handle this. If you want to bring the questions late, I will stay back. But if you allow questions to come early, then in an hour I will be gone.
In an hour.
But then it's already almost 7:45. I mean, I've sent an email message to my workplace saying that I'll be late today.
Okay, very well. Thank you. I really would appreciate it if you can stay on so that you can hear the contributions of the others. And to members of the audience, please make note of your questions. We will take those after all 4 speakers have presented. Thank you again, Dr. Rapana. We want to move very quickly into our second presentation, and this is from Mr. Rajkumar Ranjit Singh of Suriname. He's a jurist and politician affiliated with the Progressive Reform Party, the BHP. He's a former Minister of Agriculture and Public Works and a past member of the National Assembly. Welcome, Mr. Ranjit Singh. We need you to unmute. Can you look at the left of your screen?
Okay, yes, here. I'm hearing you now. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And let me see. Yes. Hello, you hear me?
We're hearing you, yes, and your slides are coming up on the screen now.
Okay, can I start?
Of course, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You know, with this talking, I will give you some information about the Indian diaspora experience in Suriname, and their functioning, their chasing the best, their contribution for a better governance and of a better life, with collaboration, of course, with third parties. I speak here on personal title. Suriname, as you may know, Suriname has a population of around 600,000, with an Indian diaspora of around 30%, consisting mainly of well-united Hindus and Muslims. The Indian diaspora used to be in a very, very neglected position and faced many, many hardships during the first part of their life in Suriname. They lacked proper schooling, proper employment, medical care were not there, roads, public transportation, production infrastructure, even they lacked voting rights. Okay. The liberation from this position started with the political unity, political union of all the parties within the Indian diaspora to form a one party. The conclusion can be made that the Indian diaspora contributed substantially to peace, development, and good government in the country, of course, with coalition partners. Slide 2, please. Yes, okay. As you see, in 1948, after the big promise of the Queen of Holland during the World War II, yes, the Dutch Parliament started discussions for new legislation for the promised grant of autonomy to Suriname. With this start, the hope of change of the political conditions for the Indian diaspora was born. The Muslim Party, Suriname, the Hindustani Japanese Party, and one non-Indian diaspora political party, the PSV, they formed a coalition to communicate together with the Dutch Parliament in 48. The Dutch Parliament was made very, very clear that the unfair and unjust electoral system should be changed and proposed the urgent introduction of a general electoral voting system for all men and women. The Dutch Parliament, they had difficult discussions, but finally they agreed with this proposed change and adopted legislation to introduce legal voting rights for all men and women in Suriname. This started the stop of the concentration of power with the then existing elites in Suriname. The lesson that was learned here is that you should chase what you can reach. Nobody is going to help you if you don't help yourself. With strong political collaboration, with genuine and reliable partners, we can bring changes for success and create pathway for more collaboration for inclusive policies in Suriname. Slide 3, please. Slide 3, please. Okay. With this change of the voting system in 1948, and before the election of 1949, the general election, the existing political parties within the Indian diaspora, then the Muslim Party of Suriname, the Hindu Party of Suriname, the Hindu-Javanese Party of Suriname, they united to become one political party, the VHP. That was in January 1949. After this union, the VHP took part in the elections, the first one in 1949, and won seats. Of the total 21 parliamentary seats, VHP won 28.5%. This success was mainly due to their strong ambition for change with a united Indian diaspora. The lesson taught here was united, the VHP can stand and help in bringing more to address the underrepresented position of the minorities in the country. Slide 4, please. In the general election of 1958, the VHP won 19% of the seats. And in the election of 1963, 22.2% of the seats available in the parliament. In 1958, the VHP became a partner in a coalition government with the NPS, that was the major African diaspora political party. In 1963, this coalition was continued till 1967. In this coalition period, a 10-year development plan for Suriname was executed. This plan had agricultural sector and the needed infrastructure as a main focal point and got the major part of the project investments with many spin-offs for the minorities, especially in the districts. This coalition government has built a strong, very, very strong base for further development of the country in the benefit of all. The lesson taught was that the collaboration among diverse ethnic and political parties can create more inclusive policies. Slide 5, yes. In the general election held in 1969, the VHP won 17 seats out of 39, which was 43%, 43.5%, and formed a coalition government with the PNP, another African diaspora political party for the period 69-73. In a report of the achievements of this coalition government, we read, and I quote, "The conclusion can be made that this government delivered not only for the economic and social reconstruction of the country, but also for the preservation of values which are gained during the continued process of political and social development. Many development projects and programs were executed during this period, benefiting all in the country. With this coalition government, further progress was made to liberate the minorities from their marginalized position. The lesson taught was that genuine political coalition can bridge historical divides between the Indo and Afro-descendant parties and populations. 6, please. The idea of coalition continued, often with the lead of the VHP, after the military coup d'etat in 1980 and in 1990. Governments formed by the military force totally ruined the country again and again. The civilian coalition governments following these destructive military governments were again and again successful in bringing back the systematically ruined economy on track and bring good governance to the people. The people, however, paid and is still paying a high price for this reconstruction. The lesson taught was never give up your ambition. Coalitions with partners who respect constitutional norms and human values can reduce tension and bring back confidence, peace, and justice and good governance. 7, please. Our constitution recently, last year, was amended and a general electoral voting system with proportionate representation is introduced. This was the big wish of the Indian diaspora from the beginning. The lesson taught again was that with genuine political party coalitions, even the constitution can be changed overnight if it is needed for eliminating underrepresentation of parts of the population and for creating equitable governance. Because of the big interest, it was learned, keep from getting bored building good relations with a large population with good policies. 8, concluding remarks. The Indian diaspora in Suriname experienced that political coalition can be beneficial, especially for, but not limited to, minority groups. Coalition contributed substantially to development in our case of being a country with an ethnic and religious diverse population. Coalition increased confidence, peace, and harmony among the population. Coalition always had defined goals for good governance. Coalition always was based on constitutional values. Coalition goals were timely communicated with the society at large. The Indian diaspora experience teaches us that coalition formed with reliable partners is the best ingredient for governance, for good governance, and finally, for good living conditions of all in the country. It should be fostered by all political parties and will be and must be promoted. Thank you very much.
A very analytical presentation, Sid. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And I just want to remind everyone, please make note of your questions. You can pose your questions to Mr. Ranjit Singh as well as Dr. Apana after all the presentations have ended. Thank you. We'll move on to our third presenter, and this is from right here in Trinidad. This is Professor Winston Dukaran, an economist, former central bank governor, Minister of Finance, and Minister of Foreign Affairs. He is the former political leader of the Congress of the People. The current political leader, Mr. Kurt Sinat, is with us in the audience. As the former political leader, Dr. Dukaran was a signatory to the Unity Accord, which saw 5 political parties form the People's Partnership Coalition in 2010. That coalition later went on to form the government. Welcome, Dr. Dukaran.
Okay, thank you very much, Shalima. I appreciate being invited to take part in this very significant conversation that you have started here today. And I thank the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center and Dr. Barberu for inviting me. I start with a few general remarks concerning the issues of politics, coalition, governance. My first slide is about the nature of politics. It was Tip O'Neill, the House Speaker in the United States of some years ago, who coined the phrase, all politics is local. Because he felt that politics really captures the aspirations of the people of the day at the time. But does that really hold in countries whose historical history has been quite dynamic and different? And that really is the basis of the political evolvement in Trinidad and Tobago. The next slide is about coalition politics. I define coalition politics as the building a consensus of different interests. Sometimes it's explicit, sometimes it's implicit. I believe in the case of Trinidad and Tobago, there are attempts to be implicit coalitions, and explicit manifestation of that have not really seen the light of day. I listened carefully to my colleague friend from Fiji, and I remember the visit of Bimam Prasad, who is now the Minister of Finance, when he came to Trinidad to give a few lectures and looked carefully at the model of coalition politics that we were trying to promote here. I hoped he had benefited from it. At least he were able to form government at one point. But coalition politics is about power sharing arrangements between political parties. Sometimes these arrangements are very formal, sometimes they are not formal. Sometimes it is only a strategic arrangement, and at times it is also based on ideological premises. So in looking at coalition attempts, we look at these different aspects. What are the questions that we must consider? Will coalition government realize good governance? The process of the conduct of public affairs that is participatory, equitable, and inclusive. When I heard my colleague from Suriname, I realized the quest for inclusiveness as a fundamental precept upon which the participatory system was being developed. Or will we rely on the institutional structures of government? Regardless of whether there is a coalition or not, to provide sustainable safeguards for adhering to the principles of good governance. And I think to some extent, that is the dilemma that we face here in Trinidad and Tobago. How best will the quest for equity, inclusiveness, and the rule of law be sustained? Through institutional structures of governance, or through the formal coalition of political parties. The Indian diaspora has survived many tests of survival in the Caribbean. There's no doubt that it has enriched Caribbean civilization to the acclaim of many scholars. In the search for identity, it is also linked the search for justice. But its politics is yet to find a viable and sustainable, attractive pathway. In some of my writings on this issue, I agree with what was said earlier, that politics is based on the concept of inclusion. Given the history, the whole world today is challenged by the politics of inclusion and resurgence of identity politics. So even the contemporary situation is now responding to that requirement. Today's complex environment requires a coalition partnership in order to ensure that the good governance prospects can be maintained. I want to introduce three small notions here that explain the political story of what I refer to as a choiceless democracy in Trinidad and Tobago. One notion is statehood politics. Statehood politics emerged from the transition from the colonial era to the independence era. And those who captured power at that time maintained the power that was previously held by the colonial powers. And to some extent, they behaved in the same way. And that led to what is called nationhood politics. The view that we should try and forge a new nation, and what are the premises upon which such a nation should be forged. Resulting from which we found the issue of victimhood politics. So in Trinidad case, we found that those who took power came from the party that exercised the right to govern. And the opposition really was the right to be a victim. And that philosophical underpinnings shaped the behavior of politics in Trinidad, in my view. I got involved in the actual politics of this country many years ago. And my first election was as a candidate for the then United Labour Front, under the leadership of the late Honorable Baste Upandi. It had an ideological focus. At the time I got involved, it was they controlled a mere 7 seats in the local government system of over 120 seats. We forged a coalition of several opposition parties. One called the ONAR, the other the DAC, the other the Tapia, in what was called One Love, drawing on the world's top reggae singer and songwriter, the legend Bob Marley of Jamaica. Nizam Mohammed, a former speaker in the parliament, inscribed One Love in the prayers of the lower house. What was the impact of that One Love coalition? This coalition resulted in a historic victory, winning 33 out of 36 seats in the national parliament, forming a government under the leadership of A.N.R. Robinson. And this is the first time that the PNM, who had led the country for 30 years prior, since independence, under the leadership of Dr. Eric Williams, was defeated. Next slide. The coalition collapsed in its first term. There was also a 1990 what was described as an attempted coup, what I prefer to call a hostage crisis. It was an important point of departure in Trinidad's democratic life. I was involved in trying to avert the risks to a democracy during that trying moment. Out of that One Love coalition emerged the United National Congress, which was then formed. What really has happened? The center of gravity in the politics has slipped away. After that period, what I call the politics of arithmetic, numbers of seat, took over from the issues of ideology, policy, and program. Government and opposition took turns in governing for several years. Manin, Pandi, Mandin. The center of gravity in the politics slipped away. The ideas that kept the political center intact yielded to numbers. No more geometry in politics, no more algebra, only arithmetic. Next slide. It is at that point that fortune would bring me to form the Congress of the People, what we described as the 21st century political party. It was formed in the mantra of getting the politics right and on the platform of good governance. Although having secured 22% of the vote, the Congress of the People did not win a seat in the National Parliament, but did control 4 of the 10 regional corporations. Subsequently, we formed a partnership with the United National Congress and again formed a government with 27 of the 41 seats. That too collapsed within its term, and so too was the prospects for coalition politics in Trinidad and Tobago. What really happened as we reflect? Was it really a clash of the party of statehood versus the party of victimhood? The party of statehood being the right to govern, the party of victimhood is the right to oppose. Did the constitution and electoral arrangements divide the country on ethnic grounds? Was there missing the attractive ideological glue that crossed the ethnic divide? In the context of the role of the state, do we have too much government and too little governance? Was the political premises of the post-independence nationhood at fault? These and some other questions have emerged. Did the leaders in the politics subscribe to all politics is local versus building a viable national consensus? Was the quest for good governance undermined by the finance and power of the old political order of the elites of the existing political parties? And I repeat that. The quest for good governance was undermined by finance and power of the old political order of the elites of the existing political parties, not working separately, but working together. Did the Indian diaspora fall into the political trap created by the leaders in the politics of Trinidad and Tobago who had an unholy alliance and its own brand of political entrepreneurship. And the question remains today, how could the politics of the Indian diaspora rise to shape the calling for a higher freedom and political possibilities of today? And my final slide, a comment. The discourse on these questions may enrich the political conversations so much in need in Trinidad and Tobago, and was put together very succinctly in the foreword to one of my books by the Prime Minister of Jamaica, former Prime Minister of Jamaica, P.J. Patterson. And he said it in these words: "It is high time that the perception of politics as an obstacle to the advancement of the Caribbean be removed. To become the catalyst for meaningful change, politics must be visionary, but yet pursued through positive activism and principled purpose." We are therefore at a point where the statecraft required for the politics of the future needs now to be reappraised. And this, I hope, would add to the conversation that you have bravely begun to and opened here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dukaran. Another very analytical presentation, and one that is quite emotive for us in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, may I remind you, please hold your questions and comments. You will be able to post them after our next speaker. And let me bring on very quickly Dr. Vishnu Visram of Guyana. He's now living in New York. He's a political opinion pollster and prolific international journalist specializing in Indian diaspora matters. He played a key role in establishing journals and centers for Indian diaspora studies. Welcome, Dr. Visram.
If you can see him, can you unmute him? He would be under the name Bhatia.
Let me try. I did admit for one Bhatia.
Oh, yes. He's here.
Okay.
Yeah, I am unmuting. Yes.
Right.
He's
Well,
here.
thank you very much for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to speak about coalition politics. Having listened to Professor Winston Dukaran just now, I don't think there is much more to add to what he said, but a very enlightening and erudite presentation on coalition politics, especially as it pertains to Trinidad and Tobago. There are two types of coalition one can make reference to. One is both of them. Well, one is pre-election coalition, and the other one post-election coalition. Some societies don't allow for post-election coalitions. In Trinidad and Tobago, as we all know, there were pre-election coalitions in which Dr. Winston, Professor Dukaran just mentioned the amalgamation of political parties that led to the formation of the NAR in 1985-1986 and its magnificent victory of 33-3. And as he also indicated, that coalition collapsed for reasons I don't want to get into, but for which I wrote about extensively in the mass media. And then the other type of coalition, of course, is post-election coalition, where political parties come together to form a government, especially if one political party does not have the numbers in order to form the government. We saw that in Guyana, for example, in 1964, when political parties formed a post-election coalition. In Trinidad and Tobago, there was a post-election coalition in 1995 that led to Baz de Pande becoming prime minister, where the UNC formed the coalition with the NAR, led by then leader of the NAR, Mr. Robinson. And then we have another arrangement of coalitions, as happened in 2010, that again, Professor Dukaran made reference to, in which two political parties contested the election in an accommodation, and that accommodation won the election 29-12 or 27-12 and 2. I think it was really 29-12. With regards to Guyana, under the current constitutional arrangement, there can be no post-election coalition. There is only pre-election coalition, because the Guyana Constitution makes it very clear: whichever party wins a plurality or a majority forms the government. Whichever political party wins a plurality or a majority forms the government. The problem is, if you have a plurality and not a majority of seats in the parliament, you are subjected to a no confidence vote, as was going to happen to the People's Progressive Party in 2015, that forced it to call an early elections, an election that it lost. If a party is short of a majority in Guyana, it has to hope that there is another party willing to support it outside of the government or even part of the government post-election. Failing that, then it could lose a no confidence vote, as happened to the PPP in 2015. Another scenario that happened in Guyana in 2006 is that the PPP won a majority and another political party won a seat, and the PPP embraced that political party, the TUF, the United Force, and they formed, well, they didn't form, but the TUF was allowed to become part of a coalition government. So you have these various formations of coalition government. Now, today in Trinidad and Tobago, without a coalition of the opposition, that party, the United National Congress, cannot win an election based on all analytical perspectives of very erudite scholars at the at UE and elsewhere, and poll numbers have also shown that, and historically in Trinidad and Tobago, without a coalition, without some kind of accommodation or arrangement, it's very difficult for any political party to defeat the PNM on its own. And had it not been for the intervention of Winston Ducaran in 2010, it would have been virtually impossible, I think, for the UNC to win that election in 2010. So kudos go to Winston Ducaran for that stance and that position. And one must also salute him for contesting a seat, the very, very marginal seat of Tunapuna, where it is almost impossible for an opposition to win. And had the UNC not been able to win, had the COP not been able to win that seat, which came with swing voters in other constituencies as well, then it would have been almost impossible for the partnership to be in government today. So one can see how crucial and critical coalitions are: pre-election coalition and post-election coalition in the case of Guyana and in the case of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, do coalitions survive? Regrettably, the NER, as Winston Ducaran pointed out, collapsed. Again, for reasons I don't wish to. And again, the partnership collapsed because of the obstinate position of leaders to give proper accommodation and encouragement and embracing the other partners in the government. Had that taken place, the UNC probably, that partnership probably would have won re-election 2015. Now, again, there was no accommodation and partnership in 2020, and the United National Congress lost. And next year will be general election unless there is an accommodation. I've seen reports from members or leadership of the UNC that says there'll be no accommodation. They don't need to embrace anyone, that they will win on their own. Well, they're going to lose on their own as well. The only way forward for the opposition to get into government is through some kind of arrangement with the opposition parties. Unfortunately, as in 2010, there is no Winston Dukaran out there that can bring together someone of credibility who can bring together the minor political parties in some form of an equivalent of a COP. It doesn't have to be the COP, but an equivalent of a COP, someone of credibility and experience. I'm afraid it doesn't look good for the UNC next year. But 1 year is still a long way to go in politics. Anything can happen from now to then. With those few words, I hope I have shined some light on coalition politics. And I like the idea of coalition politics. I like the idea of pre-election coalition politics in particular. Post-election may not work properly unless there are proper arrangements for pre-election coalition and accommodation. Thank you very much. I hope and there'll be to provide more time for discussion of this subject and topic. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Dr. Bisram. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I would like to say thank you to all our speakers today. Dr. Subhash Apana from Fiji, Mr. Rajkumar Ranjit Singh from Suriname, Professor Winston Dukaran from Trinidad and Tobago, and Dr. Vishnu Bisram from New York, originally from Guyana. We're ready to take our questions and your comments, and I'll ask you to please raise your electronic hands. It's in the reactions button at the base of your screen. Kindly raise your electronic hand so that I can call upon you. And I want to welcome our first question from Dr. Shadanand Singh, who celebrated his 80th
good
birthday last
evening.
week.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I think the core question I have put this. Would you like, Salimaji, to read my question on the chat?
Let me do that for you. No problem.
Thank you.
Sure. So you're saying the core question tonight is, would political coalitions contribute to equitable governance in the Indian diaspora? And Dr. Singh is asking, isn't a coalition with multiple political parties indispensable, especially in the interest of sustainable development and nation creation in the colonized lands with ethnic diversity? Dr. Singh, are you posing this question to all?
I think to my colleague and friend Ranjit Singh ji. Hi, bhai, kaise ho? Yeah. Please, a question for you especially.
Okay, can we ask you to unmute Mr. Ranjit Singh, please?
Dr. Ranjit Singh.
Yes.
Go on.
Yeah, so I have a hard time with my ears. I can't. Can you repeat your question, please?
Is it not? In Suriname we have introduced by the leaders Lakshman and Pengel in the year 1950 the policy of brotherhood, for broederingspolitiek, And my question is, if you read the core question tonight is it necessary to have a coalition? In countries like Suriname, Trinidad, Guyana, where multi-ethnic diversity is dominating the politics, is it necessary to do this? Because without the coalition, you never can rule a country. That we have seen in Guyana, that we can see today in Trinidad and in Suriname too. And the policy of Lakshman was, without coalition with the other ethnic parties, you can never rule a country, never will have a sustainable development, nation creation, etc., etc. What is your experience, Dr. G?
Yes, thank you. I think that the policy that was formed with Mr. Pengel and Mr. Lakshman, they were aiming to bring peace and understanding with each other. their politics was based on bringing the country to development, because we were facing very hard time from the colonial time, and it was needed to come together somehow. Maybe if you know that Mr. Pengel, as a leader of the
Afro-Surinamese.
the Afro-Surinamers, he lost the election sometime in the past, and Mr. Lashman offered him a position.
I know.
This was done to show that we are aware of the fact that we have to cooperate with each other. And if you have seen what I have presented here, the development of the Indian diaspora is based on coalition partnership within a government. The VHP, without being in the position to decide. So, because of the authority that Mr. Lashman had at that time, and because of the respect that people had, and before of the thinking within the VHP, you know, in 58, and it was decided that VHP could work together with NPS. As you may know, that NPS was the party
that was the party of the Afro-Surinamers.
Afro-Surinamers.
Yes, okay.
They were against the forming of a electoral voting system with proportionate representatives. They were against that.
Yes.
But by the actions of Mr. Lashman and working together with the Dutch Parliament, we accepted that, and they accepted that, and the law was there, and the situation was changed. So, and it was a great happening when in that year in 58, NPS decided to work with the VHP. Even they were in minority, and as you heard, they have reached a lot of things, lot of development. They built a very good base, mainly for the people living in the interior, living in the districts. Expect the 10-year development plan was focused on bringing employment, bringing production, bringing medical care, bringing drainage facilities, bringing production infrastructure. So I think your question, is it needed to bring this Verbroederingspolitiek, the politics of brotherhood. As you may hear, I have said at the last remark that this thinking of the VHP should be fostered by everyone in the country and be promoted, because of the past of the Indian diaspora represented by the VHP. The past has a future, has a good future. If we stick to that idea, I think that Suriname will face a very peaceful future and get developed very easily. As you have heard, last year the electoral system was changed by the ruling of the Constitutional Court, that we should go to vote with
one man, one vote.
Yeah, one man, one vote, one value.
Yes,
you know, and that was accepted. And the government, Mr. Santoki's government, they accepted the law. They changed the government, and we are facing a very good future with that. If we form coalition, we have seen, you know, right now this situation. If the party, the VHP, is not going in a coalition, and the situation of the winning the winning votes that they had, if it is gone 20% down, even then the VHP can reach majority of the seats in the parliament with this system. And with 30% loss of the VHP and gaining the other parties gaining, they can come close together. What does that mean? This means that the PHP and the leaders of today should think in the way of these politics of brotherhood, not only, but make genuine coalition with hard and fast goals and measures that we stick around, and then only the country can be benefited, I think.
And do you think that it is necessary to do this on behalf, for the sake of inter-ethnic problem, interracial problem? What we do know, is that not one of the goal to?
Of course, you cannot rule as said here this afternoon. If you are a minority and you have interest in bringing development for the country, then you should go and look and find friends and make friends, and you shouldn't get bored in doing that. You should go and fight and talk and bring good policies through the media and through the parliament and through the government, and I think it is very much needed as one of the goals, of course. And if you can reach a good cooperation with the bigger part of the diaspora in Suriname, the Afro diaspora and the Indian diaspora and the Japanese diaspora, as you have seen after the coups of Mr. Bouterse, they formed a coalition and they won all election after that. So I think it will do us very, very good, and good governance will be there if we can join together and bring what the people is expecting from us. I think it is a must. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, sir. Let's take our next question now from Mr. Michael Thakur of Jamaica. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you so much. I'm particularly pleased to participate in this discussion today. I have a few questions, but at the core of my questions is a broader issue that I would like to pose to the presenters, which has to do with, is there a need, or would the balance between constituency or local politics or interests be better served versus national interest, be better served by constitutional changes in these countries that would facilitate a reserved set of seats for minority groups or representation that are more national issues, such as women, and in some cases it may be some ethnic groups, or in some cases it may be diaspora issues. I take the case of Mauritius, which has reserved 8 seats for such minority views or minority representative parties that are created. And those seats are reserved. They don't have to necessarily win their seats in the House, but they are allocated based on number of votes that are granted to them. And there's a system that's structured that allows that. The reason I raise this issue is because I do believe that coalitions may be valuable, yes, but there's an important need to have a structured change in the system that facilitates sustainable coalitions. And I know that in Mauritius, sustainable coalitions have persisted and ensured that they are almost at high income level status. They are just the same level of population as Trinidad and Tobago at 1.3 million now. And they have this system that seems to have worked very well for them. So I put it to the representatives who spoke about that. But I also am curious to understand the Fijian case, which has a peculiar situation where it is the indigenous population, not purely transplanted population, that exists in Fiji. As it is, say, in Trinidad or Jamaica, where I'm from, or even Mauritius or Guyana. In their case, they have a large indigenous population. And clearly, there's greater difficulty in dealing with that the traditional system that comes from the paramount chiefs, the chiefdom system that may not be purely democratic, and treating with the outsiders that have been transplanted there, and how you get that to work together as one national unified system. So I'm curious to understand why the Indian population in Fiji has been declining so rapidly. And what other examples there are, such as in New Zealand, that could be considered in facilitated a more national political system that allows for a better, more harmonious approach, for example, as treated with the Maoris in New Zealand. I also
Mike?
yeah, I think I'll leave it at
Get
that.
a response.
I made a broader question and points that I wanted to ask about.
Yeah. Let's get a response. I want to ask Dr. Apana, please, if you'd like to respond first.
Okay, thank you for that question. The first thing we need to understand is that the ethnic Fijian portion of Fiji, the indigenous people of Fiji, have largely been in power throughout. Whatever has been accepted or considered in terms of Indian concerns or Indo-Fijian concerns in the 1970s through to 1987, largely dependent on the goodwill of a leader at that time who was particularly conscious and appreciative of the absolutely necessary contribution, presence and contribution that the Indo-Fijian was making to the country. Now, having said that, there are a lot of contradictions and conflicts within the ethnic Fijian system of politics itself. We have the divides between chiefs and commoners. We have the divides amongst provinces. Like I said, there are 14 provinces. On top of that, we also can segment the Fijian polity in terms of polity and concerns in terms of 3 confederacies. The problem is that these demarcations are highly fluid. Okay, so when it comes to elections and concerns that are prioritized prior to or post elections, these alignments show a great degree of fluidity. So we cannot really predict how it's going to pan out. Now, an interesting take which I have made earlier, previously amongst in my writings, is that the Indo-Fijian grouping can be seen as a 15th province within the political equation. It can be seen as a 15th province, but the problem there also is that there are divides amongst the Indo-Fijian electorate itself. We have the farmers, we have the farmers and workers, and then on the other hand, we have the business elites. So somebody asked, what is the future of the NFP? Somebody asked in the questions section. The NFP is perceived to be heavily influenced and to be in the hands of the business elite at this point in time. Okay, I stop there for now, and I hope that I have, to some extent, answered the question that was raised earlier.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we go on, Jay and Evan, I know you all are waiting. I'm going to ask you to please hold. Let me just ask Chand to pose a question because I believe her question is for Dr. Apana and he might need to leave very, very soon. So Chand, please. Go ahead.
The first question I had asked was the future of NFP in the current coalition. And he has just briefly mentioned it without giving any demographics. So what exactly is the current situation in Fiji regarding NFP and its members together with the other 2 coalition partners?
Dr. Apana, did you get that question?
Okay, yeah, thank you. It's a problematic question to answer, but I'll take a chance. The need for the NFP has diminished. Okay, the need that arose in December 2022, when without the NFP, the opposition could not, the grouping could not have formed a government and toppled the Fiji First government. Okay, Fiji First. That need has disappeared because I do not want to say diminished, because it actually has disappeared because of the 9 rogue Fiji First politicians who are available, parliamentarians, sorry, who are available now to fill in and give the numbers to Rambuka to remain in power. Okay, so a lot now depends on the relationship that Biman Prasad has with Rambuka. Okay, and a lot depends on the trust that he maintains within the coalition. And a third point is a lot depends on the demands that are being placed on Rambuka behind the scenes now.
Yeah.
Demands for positions, demands for, the finance portfolio, Minister for Finance. That's a portfolio that people are already looking at. And these talks, maneuvers going on behind the scenes. That is currently held by Biman Prasad. Now, if Biman Prasad loses that position, then the NFP's role within the coalition becomes even more marginalized. I hope that to some extent answers your question. But longer term, the longer term projections for NFP, it is very difficult these days to find almost anybody say anything positive about the leader of the NFP. Now, that is an indicator that the NFP has lost its broad-based support amongst the Indo-Fijian electorate. So I'll leave it at that.
And the second question is, what is the future of the Indo-Fijians in Fiji?
Well, the future of the Indo-Fijians is to become pragmatic. And that is very much visible now. 100,000 have moved out since 2022, December 2022. 100,000 Indo-Fijians, largely Indo-Fijians, have migrated from Fiji. So as one of the slides I tried to show there, that the proportion of Indo-Fijians in Fiji will decrease over time and will continue to decline.
Can I ask you another question? What is the future of the sugarcane farmers in Fiji, the Indo-Fijian sugarcane farmers?
The sugarcane industry is a sunset industry. I've talked about that in my writings earlier. It's a sunset industry. It's a political football. They keep it. They keep it alive because there is political mileage to be made out of it, and nobody will put it as plainly as I'm putting it now. The life has gone out of the sugar industry. Indo-Fijians have educated their children. Their children have either moved abroad or have joined the professions. They are all working. None of them is interested in going back to the farms. There's a sentimental attachment that the older people have with their farms. They are sitting there. Many of these farms are 15 acres in size or more, but only a few, 1 or 2 acres is being used for vegetable farming. Sugarcane farming has been forgotten because it's a very arduous, labor-intensive exercise, and it's very difficult to find laborers who are willing to work, take on these kinds of tasks these days. So the sugar industry is...
laborers are coming.
Sorry.
I'm an Indo-Fijian from Fiji.
Yes, I could tell that from your accent.
Yes, and I was in the civil service there for 30 years.
Right.
That's why I'm asking this, because I was just there recently. I came back in February and I see the decline in the life of the Indo-Fijians and the crime and the violence, the home invasions, everything. And I was thinking of investing there, but not anymore.
Yeah, you see, what will happen is in the end, people who are hardcore, who have no chance to migrate, or who have heavy connections, like sentimental connections to the country, will remain. But the children will go, and the children have continued to go. They have been educated, and the education is what is taking them abroad.
All right, thank you very much, Chan. Thank you very much, Dr. Alpana. Dr. Bisram, is your hand raised to speak to Dr. Alpana? I lost it. I just want to clarify that before he leaves. Can I ask you to unmute? Is your question or comment for Dr. Alpana, or is this you're muted, Dr. Bisram?
Yeah, right. So I also visit Fiji, not very often, but I was there last year as well. And I did see vast tracts of land that are not being farmed, that are not being planted. And there is a disinterest in agriculture, and more people want to migrate. I mean, there is little Fiji in British Columbia, in Toronto, in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, in Auckland, in Sydney, and in other cities in Australia and New Zealand. So he's right that more and more Fijians are going to migrate. I mean, let's keep in mind with the fact that up until 1986, 87, Indians were the numerical majority in Fiji. And with the coup in 1986, the Indians start migrating, and it worsened in 2000, in the year 2000, when there's the other coup that drove tens of thousands. I think the number may be more than 125,000 Indo-Fijians who migrated. It might be much larger than that. And even in New York, there are quite a number of them who are in Indo-Fijians who are settled in New York as well. Unfortunately, migration is something we can't stop, because even in Guyana, hundreds of thousands of Indians have migrated to the United States, Canada, and UK, as well as throughout the Caribbean islands.
Dr. Apana, any response?
The figure 100,000 was post 2022. Of course, 1987 we had a huge exodus. Okay, and figures go as high as, I think, beyond 100,000 at that time. Then of course we have another spike in 2000, and the whole thing has continued. Some historian has pointed out that migrations were there, but migrations spiked in 1987. They are reactions to coups, to political instability. And the other thing here is that people have now seen what living abroad is like. And we have our people there. So what happens is, through these connections, you don't fear moving into the unknown. It's no longer the unknown. Okay, because you have connections there, you have people there. Whereas in 1987, when people started moving, they didn't have too many connections there. They were actually really moving into the unknown. Okay, and therefore it's going to continue. There are two factors at play here: push factors as well as pull factors. The pull factors should not be trivialized.
Right. Thank you very much for that, and for being here with us as well. I know that your day has already begun. It's Monday morning there. So yes. Unless there are other questions for Dr. Apana, Jay, Evan, Mrs. Sinat, we thank you very much for your time, and do wish you a very good day, productive day. So let me bring Jay now. Jay, can you unmute?
Okay. Oh, it's a very informative session, and considering the problems in all the colonies, British and Dutch colonies, and the way the the Indians have fared, I'm looking at South Africa, and even in Canada, we just broke away from a small coalition that we had, where one party supported the governing party to have a House majority. The Social Democratic Party supported the Liberals, and they just broke away from that arrangement because the governing party is not delivering as fast as what the Social Democrats want things to be done for the people. Now, here in Canada, we have the Westminster system, and everybody becomes members of any party. And there's no differentiation of Indo this or African that. It's just you join any party. Now, when I go to the next question is, all the coalitions that happened in whoever presented today has shown a lot of problems, teething problems, and things that have evolved over the time. And two things I observed: elitism, and the word inclusion only came in the latter period, because I know I used inclusion in my human rights challenges since 1980 in Canada. And yet in South Africa, we had the human rights question, and what we had, the Freedom Charter, which was a multi-nation charter that the African National Congress followed and the Indian Congress followed. And we had our struggle since 1894, when Mahatma Gandhi set up the Indian Congress, and we fought the government as Indians. Sorry. But when the time in 1947, we had the African National Congress and the Indian Congress joined hands and signed the Three Doctors Pact. And that's when we said we're going to fight as a united group, non-white group, irrespective of race.
So Jay,
Then,
can I ask you to just reiterate your question, please?
or the question is how all these problems in the Caribbean and in Fiji and Suriname and so on, how can they come together to form what we call people joining a party as members? That's where you start to get included in the party that's governing and then go in and working. Can that be done in those
in those
areas?
countries? So, Dr. Dukaran, would you like to respond?
I think that is a very relevant question, and that means that the appeal of the political party must be able to include the interests of the different groups in the society. And I just want to end by one small point. In the case of Trinidad and Tobago, at the time of independence and in the period of the emergence of the People's National Movement, it was a model of a coalition from within. Many people do not realize that since after 1970, it was no longer a coalition from within. And it is that coalition of the PNM from within where they brought together the different ethnic groups through leadership that led them to a marginal victory at the time of independence. So I just raise that because I think the trust now is to have coalitions from within. And what the last speaker, Mr. J, said is in that light. That is to say that the parties that exist must now accommodate the interests of the different groups and don't bother to have formal coalitions post-election or pre-election. Thank you.
Right. Great, thank you. Mr. Kurt Sinnett, would you like to add anything to that, or would you like to pose a question or comment to Mr. Dukaran or any of the speakers?
I would like to just pose a question for anyone to answer if it's possible. Can I go right ahead?
Go ahead.
Okay. Would you all, coming out of post-colonial, would you all think that the constitution have not of most of our countries, Caribbean countries, have not catered for the evolution of the thinkers that we have today? The type of like, you understand what I'm asking?
It's for the speakers.
Hello?
I'm going to ask you to repeat your question, please.
Are you all, the question I'm asking, the constitution that most of our Caribbean countries have accepted, do you all believe that due to the evolution of our thinking today, the constitution have not been capable or actually able to accommodate the thinking, these new thinking that is coming on board?
Right. Thought processes in contemporary times are the constitutions, current constitutions, acceptable? Dr. Dukaran.
Well, I think very briefly, the question of constitutional and electoral change in the context of Trinidad and Tobago and perhaps in the wider Caribbean has always been to preserve the power structure. And all attempts to change it has never happened. Even those who promote it in opposition do not do so in government, because it's the power structure in the country that runs the the electoral system, so to speak. So Kirk is very correct. The new thinking about the politics of identity, the politics of inclusion, is not incorporated in the archaic constitutional electoral systems that we run today. And he's perfectly correct.
Excellent. Dr. Bisram.
I hope you don't mind, but I have to leave at this point. And I want to
you-
say thank you very much for this opportunity. We'll talk more. And thank you in particular for helping me.
Yeah, I endorse Professor Dukaran's response to that question.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Before you go, Dr. Kanhai, Evan, hold 1 second. Dr. Kanhai, do you have a question for Dr. Dukaran before he leaves? Or Evan, do you have a question for Dr. Dukaran before he leaves?
Yes, probably I would like, he might be someone who could answer my question. So are you hearing me? Yeah?
Yes, let's get it very quickly because he would like to leave.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
Dr. Dukaran talked about coalitions from within, and he reminded us, or informed some of us, that the original PNM was formed by a coalition. Now, some of the things that I have been hearing in Trinidad is that we can have lobby groups within the PNM. A friend of mine said, what about if Hindus were to organize to support the PNM as a lobby group? Another friend of mine and colleague talked about the fact that younger people who would traditionally or be expected to support the UNC are now moving into the PNM and hoping to be influential within that party because it is a strong party. So can the PNM become a coalition party with members who we don't, or groups we don't normally associate with the PNM? So it becomes kind of a one-party state with ourselves within that party structure. Do you think that is something that can work?
Well, could I just quickly respond?
Sure.
Yes.
No, I think those are two very deep questions that have been asked. We do not have a specific answer. One is that to be a lobby is not to be part of the framework of decision making, and therefore will not be sufficient. And the second question is, could this lead to a one-party state? And I think the person is quite correct. So, but that is not possible in Trinidad now, because what I talked about is in the early period of the PNM. As of now, that does not exist. But I think those are two deep questions. And I'll end by saying one thing coming out of this entire discussion here today is models of coalition may be an area for Bisram to do some work for us on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Dr. Dukaran, before you go, Mr. Gurjot Singh had asked this question since about 4:23 p.m. Please just give us your insights here. He says, your presentation was very insightful and analytical. He wants to know, given the political realities of the day that gave rise to the NAR, the COP, and the People's Partnership, was it a coalition of convenience or substance? Here was an opportunity to change the political and governance landscape under the NAR and the People's Partnership in a constitutional context, yet it was squandered on each occasion according to him. What went wrong?
Well, the question that I raised in my presentation about what went wrong, will be able to answer that. And you can't answer that in 1 minute. It is not really a matter of convenience. It was really a desire to respond to the electoral demands for change. But the leadership did not quite understand the historical victory in the case of the NAR. And in the case of the COP, not the COP, the partnership, in my view, the leadership did not quite understand the ideological perspective of the partnership's role in governance.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's another seminar.
Mm-hmm. So he also commented here, Your philosophy of new politics was years ahead of its time, but I think now a necessity. It would be a waste of if your input could not inject the reality of the day. I would like to see, I believe he meant, I would like to see you briefly return to the political landscape to this end.
Well, I should have mentioned earlier.
If I may,
that,
Winston's input is more needed today than ever before.
Well, I wanted to say thanks to Mr. Vishram for the very kind comments he made earlier on about my role in the politics of the partnership in particular. I think what they're trying to say is someone who is able to bridge that gap and is much younger than me is needed in the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, sir. Thank you for being on the platform with us, and we look forward to having you again.
And thank you for your help, your personal help in doing this presentation for me. Thank you.
Quite welcome. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
So we move on now to Evan. Evan, please. And thank you so much for your patience. You're muted still. Evan, you're still muted. Can you unmute, please? Evan, you're muted. We are unable to hear you. Oh, what's going on? Evan, for some reason, we're not getting you. Are you hearing me?
No, I'm unmuted.
Okay.
Hello,
Great.
you can hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Assalamu alaikum, namaskar. So I have a question for Dr. Bisram. Is he around? Yes, yes.
Go ahead.
Who is one of anywhere between 500,000 to 1 million Indo-Guyanese that are currently living outside of Guyana in 2025 or 24. He talked about the instability of coalitions in Trinidad. I'd like him to comment briefly on the two disastrous coalitions of Guyana. The first one in 1968 PNC-UF coalition, and the second one, the 2015 APNU AFC coalition, APNU being largely Afro-Guyanese. The AFC had a large component of Indo-Guyanese, with at least 5 attorneys in their leadership: Moses Nagamutu, Kemraj Ramjatan, Hemraj Rajkumar, Gita Chandan Edmund, and Charandas Prasad. So that's the first question. And the second one, Guyana is supposed to have elections next year, late in 2025. And does Dr. Bisram see any worthwhile coalition arising to challenge the PPP in 2025?
You see, the coalition failed in 1964. It collapsed in 1967 over corruption and other matters. And it collapsed, I would say, in Guyana, or again, over ethnicity, when the dominant force, the dominant political party, the PNC, APNU, ejected its partner in 1967, the United Force UF. And when in 2017 or thereabout, 2016, 2017, when it closed the Sugar Estates, where Indians were largely employed, and when it also terminated, I think more than 7,000 Amerindian voters. So once you decided to take those decisions and terminate people who voted for you, and without whose votes you could not have gotten into government, it was very clear that the party, the dominant PNC, and an ethnic party of African Guyanese, was not interested in coalition, was just interested in governing alone, as happened during the dictatorship from 1966 to 1992. It appeared that some form of autocracy or authoritarian rule was in the making from 2016 to 20, and in fact it was, when it lost the no confidence vote in December of 1918, when it refused to yield power to have free and fair elections. And even when it held free and fair elections in 2020, there was that 5 month period of various attempts to rig the election. So that was the reason for the collapse of it, in which Indians and the Europeans, and one could say the Amerindians, were ejected from the coalition. In the second question that you ask, what is the future for coalition? Well, the PPP is a sort of a coalition. It's a coalition, pre-election coalition. It's a coalition of, one would say, some ethnic groups within the party, because even though the PPP is labeled as an Indian party, it doesn't have numerical numbers to win on its own anymore based on Indian vote alone. The Indian component of the population, the voting population, may be 42% at most. So it has to make coalitions with the other groups in order to garner additional 8%. And in the last election of 2020, the PPP won 33 seats out of 65. It won just under 51% of the votes. So I think that kind of coalition will continue with the PPP. Will there be a coalition of forces to oppose the PPP? I don't see it coming. It is conceivably possible that same coalition that ran in 2015, 2020 will be retained in 2025. I just don't see how it will serve their interests to go separately. And what we're talking about is that the PNC, APNU, and the AFC, the Alliance for Change, I don't think they were going to go separately. I think they're going to come together. But will they have the numbers? It will be very, very difficult. It's too early to assess, given the migration of Indians over the last 4 or 5 years, in which an estimated 25,000 might have migrated over the last 4 or 5 years. But those numbers are also made up by Indo-Guyanese who might remigrated from Venezuela to Guyana and who have become voters. So that could neutralize the losses that the PPP would have suffered for next year. And I have a piece in today's Kaito News that says the PPP is going to win the election next year.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. We are right now at 10 minutes past 5, but we will take our final question from Atma Jagmandan. Atma, go ahead, please.
I'm trying.
Hi, we're having some difficulty hearing you.
Yes, you are hearing me? Hello?
Yeah, difficulty. There's quite an echo. Go ahead, please. Okay, you need to unmute again. You need to unmute again. Yes.
Okay. Yes, I'm Atma Jagmandan. I'm a Sudanese. As Sudanese, we have lots of, we are acquainted well with the Indo-Guyanese. During the oppressive regime of Burnham in Guyana, many Indo-Guyanese left to Suriname. We have a lot of Indians here of Guyanese descent. Even my doctor, my physician, she was an Indo-Guyanese. Also experienced the horrific things happening in the 60s in Guyana. And there was a lot of violence, and so he also told me everything basically of what happened. And also other acquaintances of mine who talked about the oppression, discrimination in Guyana. My father used to be an underdirector at a ministry, and he went with a delegation with Afro-Guyanese, Afro-Sudanese, Indo-Sudanese to Guyana for a ministerial meeting. But even the Afro-Sudanese in the delegation were astonished by what they saw regarding the oppression of Indo-Guyanese in Guyana itself. And they told the Guyanese about it.
Okay, Mr. Jagmandan, we are really having difficulties hearing you properly. Can you please, would you please just narrow it down to your question, your specific question, and who would you like to respond to your question, sir?
Okay, actually, these are just remarks, adding remarks. And I have here a book here. It's called Hindustan in the Politik. It's in Dutch. It means Hindustani or Indians in politics. And it's a comparative study about the position of Indians in politics in Suriname, Guyana, and Trinidad.
Okay, very nice.
Interesting. It's written by the well-known Chuni. So that is what I wanted to show. It's a pity that I taught it in English, but with the Google Translate and then you have the English.
Okay, very nice.
That is what I wanted to.
Okay, very nice. So we will. Thank you. So we will connect with Professor Chuni to get his comments and so on. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I think we have gotten responses for all the questions that members of the audience would have liked to ask. Unfortunately, it is now well past our closing time, and although we would have liked to continue the conversation because I know that there are some comments in the chat that need to be addressed, we have to close now. So I want to say thank you very much to all of our speakers today. Dr. Subhash Appana from Fiji, Mr. Winston Dukaran, Professor Winston Dukaran from Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Ranjit Singh from Suriname, as well as Dr. Vishnu Bisram from, let's call you Guyanese, in New York. I want to thank you all so much for your time, and I want to thank you, the members of the audience, for your participation. I'll turn you all over now to Shakira, and she'll end the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Shalama, and thank you all for taking the time to attend and participate. As we said earlier, this public meeting is being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center, and today we are supported by Ashok Ramsaran, President of the Indian Diaspora Council. And you can feel free to contact the ICC to publish your books and reports. And remember that we are asking for your suggestions, and if you give a donation, your name will be placed on our poster and all promotional materials, and you can contact Dr. Mahabir for details. Our topic next Sunday will be mathematical prowess of persons of Indian heritage. So we look forward to that. We want to thank our advisory and planning team led by Dr. Kumar Mahabir, our IT consultants Daryl Gransam and Navin Mangal, who has been advising on recording the program, which will be uploaded to our website and YouTube permanently for posterity. And thanks again to Daryl for designing the poster, and Ravin Ramsingh for the social media marketing, and Miriam Mohammed for producing our TikTok videos. So please visit, like, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to see all our past recordings. I am Shakira Mohammed from Trinidad and Tobago saying goodbye. May God bless you all. Dhanyavad.